My parents forgot my birthday for the 10th year in a row. But the moment I posted a photo of my new $125,000 Porsche, my phone did not stop ringing. They called me a thief, a liar, a disgrace. My father demanded a family meeting to confiscate my keys. He had no idea that by the time he hung up, I had already bought the bank that holds his mortgage. Before I tell you how I dismantled their entire lives, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind your family exactly who pays the bills. My name is Nia, and today I turned 32 years old. I sat alone in my 4,000 square foot penthouse, overlooking the Chicago skyline, the city lights reflecting off the glass of a $20 bottle of sparkling water. My phone sat on the marble kitchen island completely silent. No calls, no texts, not even a generic Facebook post from my mother Beatrice or my father Marcus. For most people, a birthday is a celebration. For me, it is an annual reminder of my ranking in the Wilson family hierarchy. I am the invisible child, the one who studied late at night while my younger sister Ebony was out partying. The one who worked 3 jobs to pay off student loans while my parents remortgaged their home to fund Ebony's dream wedding to Brad, her white husband who claimed to be an investment banker but mostly invested in his own ego. To them, I am just Nia, the administrative assistant who lives in the city and barely makes ends meet. They do not know I am the CFO and co-founder of Aurora FinTech, a company that just closed a merger valuing us at 9 figures. They do not know this penthouse is mine paid for in cash. They do not know the power I hold because they never cared enough to ask. I looked at the clock, 7 p.m. The day was almost over. I could have sat there and cried into my expensive throw pillows, but I decided I was done mourning a relationship that never existed. If they could not celebrate me, I would celebrate myself. I grabbed my keys and took the private elevator down to the garage. Waiting in my reserve spot was my birthday gift to myself. A brand new Porsche 911 Turbo S in matte black. It looked like a panther ready to pounce. It cost $125,000, and signing the check for it felt better than any therapy session I had ever attended. I unlocked the car, the heavy door thudding shut with a satisfying sound of German engineering. I started the engine, feeling the rumble vibrate through the leather seat. I pulled out my phone and did something I rarely do. I took a photo. Just me, the steering wheel with the iconic crest, and the city lights blurring in the background. I posted it to Facebook with a simple caption. 32 looks good on me. Happy birthday to the one person who always has my back. Myself. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and drove out into the night. I blasted music, weaving through traffic on Lakeshore Drive, feeling the wind and the speed. For 20 minutes, I felt free. Then the Bluetooth system in the car interrupted my music. Incoming call. Dad. I stared at the screen. They had not called all day. Not a whisper. But 10 minutes after I posted a picture of wealth, my father, the esteemed Deacon Marcus Wilson, was calling. I pressed answer. Nia. His voice did not sound like a greeting. It sounded like thunder from the pulpit. Hello, Dad. Thank you for the birthday wishes. I kept my voice flat, calm. Do not play games with me, girl. He shouted, his voice distorting over the high-end speakers. I just saw your Facebook. What is that? Whose car is that? It is mine. Dad. Yours. He laughed, a harsh barking sound. Stop lying. A secretary does not drive a Porsche. Did you rent it? Is this some kind of social media stunt to make yourself look important? You are embarrassing us. I did not rent it. I bought it. There was a silence on the other line, heavy and dangerous. Then came the accusation I knew was coming. Where did you get that kind of money, Nia? I work hard. Working hard does not buy a car that costs more than my house. His voice dropped to a low, seething whisper. Are you selling yourself? Is that it? Are you engaging in illicit activities? Have you brought shame upon this family by laying with men for money? Or are you moving drugs? I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This was my father. A man who preached about grace and love every Sunday. Yet his first instinct was to assume his daughter was a criminal or a prostitute rather than successful. I am a finance professional, Dad. I bought the car with my earnings. Lies. Pure lies. You are coming home. Tomorrow. I am busy tomorrow. You will be at this house tomorrow at 7 p.m. sharp. We are having a family meeting. Bring the car. Bring the paperwork. And bring whatever man is actually paying for it, because I know you did not earn this. Do not make me come up there and drag you back, Nia. Do not test me. The line went dead. I pulled the car over to the shoulder of the highway, my heart pounding against my ribs. I looked at the dark screen of the dashboard. The joy of the drive was gone, replaced by the familiar cold knot of anxiety that lived in my stomach whenever I dealt with them. They did not call to say happy birthday. They called to audit me. They called to tear me down, because the idea of me having something they did not possess was terrifying to them. I looked at the notifications flooding my phone. A text from my mother. Beatrice. We are so disappointed in you. We raised you better than this. Come home so we can fix this mess before the church finds out. And a comment on my photo from Ebony. Must be nice to have a sugar daddy. LOL. Some of us actually work for a living. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound in the quiet cabin of my six-figure car. They wanted a meeting. They wanted to interrogate me. They wanted to put me back in my place beneath them, serving them invisible until they needed a punching bag. Fine. I put the car back in gear and merged onto the highway, the engine roaring like a beast waking up. I would go to their meeting. I would drive my Porsche right up to their crumbling driveway. But I wasn't going there to apologize. I wasn't going there to explain myself. They wanted to know where the money came from. I would show them. But they were not going to like the answer. Because the money came from the same place as my rage. Focus, discipline, and a long memory. I drove home planning my outfit for tomorrow. I needed something that said, I am not your victim anymore. I am your judge. Little did they know Brad, my golden boy brother-in-law, had left a paper trail a mile wide, and I had spent the last 6 months collecting every receipt. Tomorrow, the family meeting wouldn't be about my car. It would be about their survival. The matte black finish of my Porsche swallowed the weak yellow light of my parents' porch as I pulled into the driveway. It felt like landing a spaceship in the middle of a graveyard. The house I grew up in looked smaller than I remembered, the siding peeling slightly near the gutters, the lawn patchy and defeated. But the real decay wasn't the architecture. It was the 4 people standing on the concrete walkway, arms crossed, waiting for me like a firing squad. My father Marcus stood in the center wearing his Sunday suit, even though it was a Tuesday night. He wanted to remind me of his authority. My mother Beatrice hovered nervously at his elbow, clutching a handkerchief she didn't need yet. And then there were the stars of the show. My younger sister Ebony, looking every bit the golden child in a designer dress I knew she could not afford, and her husband Brad. The man my parents practically worshipped because his skin was white and he wore a suit to work. He was leaning against my father's sedan with a smirk that made my skin crawl. He looked at my car, not with admiration, but with the hungry, calculating stare of a man trying to figure out how to pawn it. I killed the engine. The silence was heavy. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror to make sure my face was a mask of indifference, and stepped out. Nice rental, Nia. Brad called out before my feet even touched the pavement. He pushed off the sedan and walked toward me, circling the Porsche like he was inspecting a used Honda. I bet the daily rate on this is astronomical. You really shouldn't waste your secretary's salary on trying to impress us. We know what you are. I slammed the door shut. It is not a rental, Brad. He laughed, a condescending sound that grated on my nerves. Come on, I am in finance. I know how this works. You probably got a predatory lease, 20% interest, 25. This is a depreciating asset, Nia. It is a terrible investment. If you had come to me, I could have put that down payment into my new fund. You would have seen real returns instead of this piece of metal. I looked at him. His suit was ill-fitting at the shoulders, and his watch was a knockoff Rolex. I knew this because I own shares in the company that manufactures the real ones. Ebony stepped forward, linking her arm through Brad's. She looked at the car with naked envy, then curled her lip in disgust. It is too flashy, Nia. It screams insecurity. Why would a single woman need a car this fast? Who are you trying to outrun your judgment? I said dryly. But clearly I am not fast enough. Enough, my father barked. Inside, now. We filed into the living room. It smelled the same as it did 15 years ago. Lemon polish and old resentment. My father took his armchair, the throne from which he had dictated every failure of my life. My mother sat on the sofa, patting the cushion beside her for Ebony. Brad sprawled on the other chair, manspreading like he owned the place. I remained standing near the door, clutching my purse. Sit down, Nia, my mother said, her voice trembling with that weaponized fragility she used so well. You are making us nervous. I am fine standing. What is this meeting about? My father leaned forward, clasping his hands. We are concerned about you. This car, this lifestyle you are projecting on social media. It is dishonest, and it is dangerous. It is my money, Dad. It is money you should not be spending, Brad interjected. He pulled a notebook out of his pocket. Look, I did some rough calculations based on what an admin assistant makes in the city. Even if you are living in a shoebox and eating ramen, there is no way you can afford the payments on a Porsche 911 Turbo S. Not legally. He paused for effect, looking at my parents. Which means, he continued, you are either in massive debt that will eventually blow back on this family, or you are getting money from sources you do not want to talk about. My mother gasped. Oh, Lord. Nia, tell me you are not. You know what people will say. The church, your father's reputation. I am not doing anything illegal, Mom. And I am not in debt. Then sell it, my father commanded. Excuse me. Sell the car, he said, his voice rising. If you own it, sell it. Get the cash back. We have a family emergency, and since you apparently have money to burn on toys, you are going to help. I looked around the room. Emergency. Everyone looked healthy. The TV was new. Ebony was wearing Louboutins. What emergency, I asked. Ebony and Brad are trying to close on their dream home, my mother said, her eyes filling with tears. It is a beautiful estate in Oak Brook, 5 bedrooms, a pool. It is perfect for raising a family. But the market is tough, Nia. The sellers want a larger deposit, $100,000. My jaw tightened. So this was it. The emergency was that the golden child wanted a mansion. They are short. Exactly the amount you wasted on that car, Brad said, looking at his fingernails. It is just sitting in your driveway gathering dust. Meanwhile, we are trying to build a future, a legacy. You are single. You do not need a luxury car. We need a home. So you want me to sell my car and give you the money, I asked, keeping my voice level. Lone, Brad corrected quickly. A family investment. I have a huge deal closing next quarter, crypto and virtual real estate. I will pay you back with interest. I looked at Brad. I knew his type. I saw his credit report on my desk 3 hours ago. He didn't have a deal closing. He had bookies closing in on his kneecaps. No, I said. The room went deadly silent. My father stood up, his face turning a dark shade of purple. What did you say? I said no. I am not selling my car, and I am not giving you money for a house you cannot afford. My mother stood up too, her hands shaking. Nia, how can you be so selfish? Your sister needs this. She is trying to start a family. You are just living for yourself. It is greedy. It is sinful. It is my money, I repeated. It is family money. My father roared. We raised you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. And now you drive up here in a six-figure car and refuse to help your own flesh and blood. You are ungrateful. You are spiteful. You are doing this just to make Ebony look bad. I looked at Ebony. She was smirking, enjoying the show. She knew she didn't have to say a word. They would do the dirty work for her. I am leaving, I said, turning toward the door. You walk out that door and you are not welcome back, my father threatened. I reached for the doorknob. Suddenly, my mother was there. She moved faster than I thought possible. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. Give me the keys, she hissed. What? Give me the keys to the car. We will sell it ourselves. We will do what is right since you won't. I yanked my arm away. Don't touch me. She slapped me. It wasn't a soft slap. It was a hard, stinging blow that echoed in the silent hallway. My cheek burned instantly. I stared at her. She looked shocked at her own action, but then her face hardened into a mask of self-righteous fury. You are a bad daughter, she spat. A bad sister. God will punish you for this greed. I touched my cheek. The heat was radiating through my skin, but inside I felt ice cold. The last tether of guilt, the last thread of obligation I felt toward these people snapped. I opened the door. The night air rushed in, cool and clean. You want God to punish me? I asked quietly. Be careful what you pray for, Mom. Sometimes punishment looks a lot like justice. I walked out to my car. Behind me, I heard my father shouting, telling me I was dead to him. I heard Brad laughing, telling Ebony not to worry, that I would come crawling back when the repo man came for my car. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I picked up my phone and dialed my assistant. It was 8:30 at night, but she answered on the first ring. Yes, Ms. Wilson. Start the file on Brad, I said. And call the bank. I want to buy the mortgage on my parents' house, tonight. I pulled out of the driveway, leaving them standing on the porch, screaming at my taillights. They wanted $100,000 fine. I would spend 10 times that amount just to make sure they never asked me for a dime again. I shifted the Porsche into reverse, ready to leave the toxicity of my childhood home behind forever. My cheek was still throbbing from my mother's slap, a physical manifestation of 30 years of emotional battery. But before I could back out of the driveway, a figure lunged in front of my headlights. It was my mother, Beatrice. She wasn't screaming anymore. She had switched tactics, instantly moving from the role of the punisher to the role of the martyr. She threw herself onto the hood of my car, her palms slapping against the metal, her face contorted in a mask of weeping agony. I slammed on the brakes. For a second I considered just revving the engine to scare her, but I was not them. I was not cruel without cause. I rolled down the window just an inch. Move, I said. My voice was ice. Nia, please. She sobbed, sliding off the hood and clinging to the door handle. Her tears were copious and loud, a performance designed for the neighbors as much as for me. Do not leave like this. Do not leave your family in anger. We only want what is best for you. We love you. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had just struck me across the face because I refused to bankroll her golden child. You do not love me, I said. You love what you think you can take from me. That is not true, she wailed. We sacrificed everything for you. We gave you life. We gave you a home. How can you be so stingy? How can you hold on to money when your sister is suffering? It is just money, Nia. It does not hug you back at night. Just money. The phrase triggered a memory so sharp it felt like a physical blow to the gut. It wasn't the slap that hurt the most. It was the audacity of her pretending that money hadn't always been the weapon they used to bleed me dry. I unlocked the door and stepped out. I needed her to hear this. I needed to look her in the eye, not through a pane of glass. You want to talk about sacrifice? I asked, my voice rising for the first time. You want to talk about being stingy? Let us talk about 2008. Let us talk about my acceptance letter to Wharton. My mother froze. Her tears stopped, instantly replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. She knew exactly what I was talking about. It was the skeleton in our closet that they had buried under layers of gaslighting and denial. I was 18. I had studied until my eyes burned every single night for 4 years. I got into one of the best business schools in the country, and I had the money to go. Grandma had left me $50,000 in savings bonds specifically for my education. It was in a joint account with you. Remember, Nia, that was a long time ago, she whispered, looking toward the house as if hoping my father would come out and silence me. I went to the bank the day before tuition was due. I continued stepping closer to her. I handed the teller my withdrawal slip. And do you know what she told me? She told me the balance was zero. $0.00. It was an emergency. My mother hissed, her voice low and desperate. It was a wedding, I shouted. You took my entire future. You took the only thing Grandma left me. And you spent every single dime on Ebony's first wedding to that guy Dion, the one she met at a club 2 months prior. My mother straightened her spine, trying to regain her authority. Ebony was in love. It was her special day. We could not let her get married at the courthouse like a pauper. We had to maintain our standing in the community. You were smart, Nia. We knew you would figure it out. You were always the resourceful one. Ebony needed help. She needed a good start. A good start, I laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. You threw a $60,000 party for a marriage that lasted 6 months. You bought her a custom gown. You rented a ballroom. You had an ice sculpture of a swan. Do you remember the ice sculpture, Mom? Because I do. I remember it melting while I was filling out loan applications with an interest rate that should have been illegal. It was family money, she insisted. We did what we had to do. You stole from me. You committed fraud. And while Ebony was on her honeymoon in Bali, staying in a 5-star resort on my dime, do you know where I was? I did not wait for her to answer. I leaned in close, forcing her to see the damage she had done. I was in a basement kitchen of a diner, scraping burnt eggs off plates until 3 in the morning. My hands were raw from the bleach. My feet bled every night. I worked 3 jobs. I slept 4 hours a day. I ate leftover fries because I could not afford groceries after paying my tuition. And when I called you crying, begging for just $100 to buy textbooks, what did you say? I do not remember. That she lied, looking away. You said I needed to learn responsibility. You said God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers. You hung up on me because you were busy helping Ebony pick out furniture for the apartment you also paid for. I stepped back, looking at the house that had never really been my home. It was a monument to their hypocrisy. You sacrificed me, Mom. You sacrificed my youth, my peace, and my safety, so Ebony could play princess. You taught me that my only value was in how much pain I could endure, so she did not have to feel any. That is not fair, she cried, grabbing my arm again. We love you both. No, you love her. You tolerate me. And now that I have clawed my way out of the hole you threw me in, now that I have built a fortress out of the stones you threw at me, you think you are entitled to the keys. I shook her hand off me. It felt like shedding a dead skin. My money is not just currency, Mom. It is my blood. It is the sleep I lost. It is the hunger I felt. It is the years of panic attacks and exhaustion. Every dollar I have represents a moment I survived without you. So when you ask me for $100,000 like it is nothing, you are asking me to bleed for you again, and I am all out of blood. Nia, please, she begged, seeing the resolve in my eyes. Brad is in trouble. Real trouble. If they do not get this house, I do not know what will happen. Then let it happen, I said coldly. Let Ebony wash dishes. Let Brad work 3 jobs. Let them learn responsibility. Tell them God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers. I got back into the car. My mother stood in the driveway looking small and defeated in the red glow of my taillights. She looked like a woman realizing that her retirement plan just walked out the door. I put the car in drive. As I pulled away, I watched her in the rearview mirror. She wasn't crying anymore. She was pulling out her phone, probably to call my father and spin a new web of lies about how cruel and ungrateful I was. Let them talk. Let them pray for my downfall. They had no idea that I wasn't just leaving. I was preparing for war. I touched the screen of my phone and dialed my lawyer. It was time to pull the trigger on the mortgage. They stole my past. I was about to buy their future. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime revealing the chaos unfolding in the pristine white marble lobby of Aurora FinTech. I had spent the morning reviewing the final diligence reports for our merger with heavyweights in New York, a deal that would cement my legacy and net worth, but nothing in the spreadsheets prepared me for the sight of my brother-in-law Brad screaming at our head of security. He was wearing a suit that was too shiny under the recessed lighting, the fabric straining at the buttons as he gestured wildly. Beside him stood Ebony, my sister, looking around the high-end lobby with a mixture of awe and entitlement, as if she were pricing the furniture for a future estate sale. They looked completely out of place against the backdrop of glass steel and hushed corporate efficiency. I stepped out of the elevator, my heels clicking rhythmically on the stone floor. The sound cut through the noise and Brad spun around. His face was flushed sweat beading on his forehead. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. He did not see a chief financial officer. He did not see a founder. He saw a target. "There she is!" Brad shouted, pointing a finger at me. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, who I had personally hired 2 years ago, looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. I gave her a subtle nod, a silent command to hold her ground, but let me handle this. Brad marched toward me, ignoring the security guard who stepped into his path. He stopped just short of physical contact, invading my personal space with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. "We know what you are doing, Nia," he announced, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "We know how you got that car." I folded my arms, maintaining the icy composure that had terrified board members twice his age. "What are you doing here, Brad? This is a place of business." "Business?" he sneered, looking me up and down. "Is that what you call it?" I did some digging. "Nia, I know people in this city. I know people in finance. And nobody has ever heard of a Nia Wilson running anything. You are a ghost, which means you are nothing but a glorified assistant." He turned to the small crowd of employees and clients who had paused to watch the spectacle. He wanted an audience. He wanted to humiliate me so deeply that I would hand over the keys to the Porsche just to make him stop. "She drives a car worth more than most people make in 5 years," Brad announced to the room. "And she wants you to believe she earned it. But we know the truth. Who is he, Nia? Who is the boss you are sleeping with? Is it the CEO? Is that why you have this job? Is that why you have that car?" Ebony stepped up beside him, crossing her arms. "Just admit it, Nia. You are somebody's mistress. That is the only explanation. Dad was right. You are selling yourself. It is disgusting. We are here to talk to your boss. We are going to tell him exactly what kind of person you are. We are going to expose you." I felt a vein throb in my temple. The accusation was so cliché, so steeped in the racism and sexism I had fought my entire career. To them, a black woman could not possibly own the building. She could not possibly be the architect of the deal. She had to be on her knees. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that I signed the paychecks. I wanted to tell them that the man they thought I was sleeping with was actually my employee. But I couldn't. The merger was in a sensitive quiet period. Any public outburst, any revelation of personal instability or scandal involving the executive team could spook the investors. I had to protect the deal. I had to protect my equity. I had to play the role they assigned me just for 5 more minutes. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I looked at Sarah, then at the head of security, a former Marine named Marcus. "I am going to ask you once to leave," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You are trespassing." "We are not going anywhere until we see your boss," Brad yelled. "I want to speak to the man in charge. I want to know if he knows his secretary is defrauding her family and parading around in his company assets." I pulled my phone from my pocket and typed a quick message to Marcus. "Remove them. Use force if necessary. Do not mention my title." Marcus nodded imperceptibly. He stepped forward, his massive frame blocking Brad's view of the elevators. Sir, you need to leave the premises immediately, Marcus said, his voice calm but brooking no argument. Do not touch me, Brad spat, trying to shove past him. I have rights. I am here to report a crime. This woman is a fraud. That was the moment the dynamic shifted. Brad made the mistake of putting his hand on Marcus. In one fluid motion, Marcus secured Brad's wrist and twisted his arm behind his back. Brad let out a yelp of pain that was more shock than injury. Ebony shrieked. Get off him. You cannot do that. We are her family. Naya, tell them to stop. I stood perfectly still watching them. I looked at Ebony, the sister I had protected from bullies on the playground, the sister I had tutored, the sister whose wedding I had paid for with my future. I looked at her, and I felt nothing but a cold, clinical detachment. I do not know these people, I said to Marcus loud enough for the lobby to hear. They are harassing me. Please remove them. Nia, Ebony screamed, her face twisting into ugly red blotches. You liar, Mom is going to hear about this. You are dead to us, Marcus. And two other guards began to frog march them toward the revolving doors. Brad was struggling, his shoes squeaking on the marble, shouting about lawsuits and police. Ebony was crying now, the tears of a spoiled child who had finally been told no. They were dragged out onto the sidewalk of downtown Chicago, still screaming. The glass doors spun shut, sealing out their noise. The lobby fell silent. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I looked around at the employees who were staring at me wide-eyed. I apologized for the disruption, I said, my voice projecting clear authority. Please return to work. I walked back to the elevator, my head held high. I did not look back at the street. I did not check to see if they were still there. I pressed the button for the penthouse floor. As the doors closed, my mask finally slipped. My hands shook. Not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like rocket fuel. They had come to my sanctuary. They had tried to destroy my professional reputation because they were greedy and jealous. Brad had called me a whore in the lobby of the company I built from a laptop on a kitchen table. They wanted to know where the money came from. They wanted to know who I really was. They were going to find out. But not today. I walked into my office and locked the door. I went to the wet bar and poured myself a glass of water, my reflection in the window showing a woman who looked calm, collected, and utterly lethal. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call the police. I dialed a number I had saved years ago, a number for a man named Vance. He was a forensic accountant and a private investigator who specialized in finding money that people didn't want found. He answered on the second ring. Nia, he said, it has been a while. I have a job for you, Vance. Name it. Bradford Miller, my brother-in-law. He claims he is an investment banker. He claims he has a big crypto deal closing. I want you to find everything. Every bank account, every credit card, every gambling debt, every lie. I want to know who he owes money to. I want to know why he is so desperate for $100,000 that he would try to extort his wife's sister. I can do that, Vance said. Give me 48 hours. You have 24, I said. And Vance, yeah, dig deep. I have a feeling this man is drowning, and I want to be the one who hands him the anchor. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked down at the street 40 stories below. I couldn't see them, but I knew they were out there nursing their bruised egos, calling my parents to spin a new web of lies about how cruel I was. Let them think they are the victims. Brad had made a fatal error. He thought I was a secretary. He thought I was powerless. He didn't know that in the world of finance, information is the only currency that matters. And I was about to become the richest woman he ever met. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the public records database. It was time to see just how much debt my parents had signed their names to. If Brad was desperate, it meant he had already tapped them dry. And if they were dry, they were vulnerable. I wasn't just going to defend myself, I was going to buy their debts. I was going to own the very roof over their heads. And when the time came for the next family meeting, I wouldn't be sitting in the guest chair. I would be sitting at the head of the table holding the deed. The text message from my mother arrived at 6 in the morning on Sunday. It was brief and commanded the same heavy-handed authority she wielded whenever she felt her control slipping. Your father expects you at service today. It is time for repentance. Do not make us wait. I stared at the ceiling of my penthouse bedroom. Repentance. They wanted me to repent for being successful. They wanted me to repent for protecting my own assets from a brother-in-law who treated finance like a casino. I almost deleted the message and went back to sleep. I could have spent the morning drinking mimosas on my balcony watching the boats on Lake Michigan. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I wanted to see how far they would go. I wanted to see the theater of their righteousness up close. I dressed carefully. No designer labels visible. No flashy jewelry. I wore a simple navy dress and low heels. I looked like the modest, obedient daughter they remembered, the one they thought they could break. I drove the Porsche, but parked it 3 blocks away, walking the rest of the distance to the brick church that had been the center of my parents' social universe for 30 years. The air inside Greater Hope Baptist Church was thick with the smell of floor wax, old hymnals, and expensive perfume. It was humid, the kind of heat that made your clothes stick to your skin instantly. As I walked down the center aisle, heads turned. The whispers started immediately rippling through the pews like a wave. I knew what they were saying. That is Nia. The one who won't help her family. The one who thinks she is better than us. My mother had been busy. She had clearly poisoned the well long before I arrived. I found a seat in the back row, trying to be inconspicuous, but an usher, Mrs. Gable, a woman who had known me since I was 5, marched over. She didn't smile. She pointed a gloved finger toward the front row directly beneath the pulpit. Your father saved a seat for you, Sister Nia. He wants you close to the word today. I walked the length of the church, feeling hundreds of eyes boring into my back. In the front row, my mother sat stiffly, wearing a hat with a brim so wide it could shelter a small family. Beside her was Ebony, looking demure and teary-eyed, and Brad. Brad was wearing a suit that fit better than the one he wore to my office, likely bought with the last of my parents' credit. He looked up at the cross with a performative piety that made my stomach turn. My father Marcus sat in the large chair behind the pulpit. He was the associate pastor, a man who wielded scripture like a sword. When he saw me sit down, he didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just adjusted his microphone and stood up. The service began with the usual hymns, but the tension in the room was a live wire. Everyone knew this wasn't just a Sunday service. It was a tribunal. When it was time for the sermon, my father stepped forward. He gripped the wooden podium with both hands, looking out over the congregation until his gaze landed heavily on me. Today, church, I want to talk to you about the spirit of the world, he boomed. His voice filled the sanctuary, deep and resonant. I want to talk about how the world tells us to hoard. The world tells us to build high walls. The world tells us what is mine is mine. Amens echoed from the corners of the room. But the scripture tells us a different story. He continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that forced everyone to lean in. We all know the story of the prodigal son. The child who took his inheritance and ran. The child who loved money more than his father's house. But today, I see a new spirit. I see the spirit of the prodigal daughter. The heir left the room. He wasn't even being subtle. He was preaching my indictment. She gathers treasures on earth, he shouted, pointing a finger toward the ceiling, but his eyes were locked on mine. She drives the chariots of kings while her own flesh and blood walk in the dust. She lives in a tower of glass while her family prays for a roof. Is that righteousness? No, sir. The congregation responded in unison. Is that love? No, sir. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Ebony leaned her head on Brad's shoulder, playing the victim perfectly. I sat stone still, my face a mask. Inside, I was marveling at the manipulation. He was using God to extort me. It was brilliant. It was evil. My father paused, wiping sweat from his brow. But there is redemption, church. There is always a way back. The Lord loves a cheerful giver, and today we have an opportunity to sow a seed. We have a young man in our midst, a man of vision who wants to build something for this community. He gestured to Brad. Brad stood up, buttoning his jacket, looking humble. Brother Brad has a vision for a business that will bring jobs to this community, my father announced. A digital investment firm, a way to lift us all up. But the enemy has attacked his finances. The enemy has hardened the hearts of those who should help him. The enemy. That was me. I was the enemy in my father's church. We are going to take up a special offering today, my father said. We are going to show the devil that we support our own. We are going to help Brother Brad launch this ministry of finance. The ushers came forward with the gold offering plates. The organist started playing a slow, manipulative melody. My father stepped down from the pulpit. He took one of the plates from an usher and walked directly to the front row. He stood in front of me. The music stopped. The church went silent. Nia, my father said, his voice amplified by the microphone clipped to his lapel. The Lord has blessed you. We know you have prospered, but prosperity without charity is a sin. This is your chance to repent. This is your chance to show this family and this church where your heart lies. Put a seed in the ground. Help your sister. Help your brother. He held the plate out. It was empty. He wanted me to be the first. He wanted a check. A big one. He was gambling that the social pressure, the eyes of the community, the weight of my childhood faith would break me. He thought I would crumble and write a check just to make the staring stop. I looked at the plate. I looked at Brad, who was watching me with a smug, expectant grin. He thought he had won. He thought he had found the one lever I couldn't resist. I reached into my purse. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. My mother stopped crying to watch. My father smiled, a triumphant, smug curling of his lips. I pulled out a small notepad and a pen. I did not pull out my checkbook. I did not pull out cash. I wrote a single sentence on the paper. I folded it once, sharp and precise. I stood up. I was taller than my father in my heels. I looked him dead in the eye. I dropped the folded paper into the gold plate. It made a soft sound, but in the silence of the church, it sounded like a gavel falling. What is this? My father asked, his smile faltering. Read it, I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried. He hesitated, then picked up the paper. He unfolded it. I watched his eyes scan the words. I watched his face turn from smugness to confusion, and then to a shade of gray I had never seen before. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The note read, God knows who the fraud is, and so does the FBI. I didn't wait for him to recover. I turned around and walked up the center aisle. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor was a steady, rhythmic beat. Click, click, click. Nia, my mother screamed from the front row, breaking the spell. You come back here, you ungrateful wretch! I kept walking. I passed Mrs. Gable, whose mouth was hanging open. I passed the choir. I passed the people who had judged me since I was a child. I walked out the double doors into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. Behind me, I heard the murmur of the congregation rising into a roar of scandal. I had just walked out on the associate pastor in the middle of a shakedown. I had just declared war in the house of the Lord. I walked the 3 blocks to my car, my heart rate steady, my hands calm. They wanted a show, I gave them one. They wanted money. They were going to get something much more valuable. They were going to get the truth. I got into my Porsche and checked my phone. There was a text from Vance, the private investigator. Sent you the file on Brad. You are going to want to sit down for this. It is worse than we thought. He is not just broke, Nia. He is swimming with sharks. I smiled. The church service was just the opening act. The real judgment day was coming, and I was the one bringing the fire. I sat in the driver's seat of my Porsche, the engine idling, the air conditioning blasting against the sheen of sweat that had broken out on my forehead during my escape from the church. My phone pinged again. It was the full file from Vance. I drove to a quiet corner of a Starbucks parking lot, killed the engine, and opened the document on my iPad. What I saw made my blood run cold, then boil. Vance had done exactly what I paid him for. He had peeled back the layers of Brad's life like a rotten onion. The first page was a summary of employment, or rather the lack thereof. Brad had not been an investment banker for 2 years. He had been fired from a mid-tier firm for unauthorized trading and gross negligence. Since then, his only source of income had been unemployment checks, which ran out 6 months ago, and sporadic transfers from my sister Ebony. I scrolled down to the financials. It was a disaster, a catastrophe of epic proportions. Brad had 6 credit cards maxed out to the limit, but that was the easy stuff. That was the stuff you could file bankruptcy on. The real horror show was in the wire transfers. Over the last year, Brad had moved nearly $500,000 into offshore crypto exchanges. Most of it was gone, vaporized in bad leverage trades and a gambling addiction that Vance had tracked to 3 different online casinos. But here was the kicker. The money he lost was not his. Vance had flagged a series of promissory notes. Brad had been borrowing from private lenders, not banks, not credit unions, loan sharks. The kind of people who did not send late notices in the mail. They sent guys with baseball bats. I looked at the dates. The payments were escalating. He was in deep. He owed $500,000 to people you do not want to owe $5 to. Then I saw the emails. Vance had hacked into Brad's personal account. I didn't ask how. I didn't care. I read an email chain between Brad and a man named Silas. "You have until the end of the month, Brad. After that we take collateral. And you know we don't mean your car. The timestamp was 2 days ago." I kept reading. I found a draft email Brad had sent to a mortgage broker. The subject line was, "Wilson Property Refinance." My stomach dropped. He wasn't trying to buy a new house in Oak Brook. That was a lie. The dream home, the pool, the nursery for the grandkids, it was all a fabrication designed to extract cash from my parents. He was trying to get them to take out a second mortgage on their home, the house I grew up in, the house my father had paid off 10 years ago. He was going to take their equity, their safety net, their retirement, and he was going to throw it into the black hole of his debt to save his own skin. I scrolled further. There was a prospectus attached to an email he had sent my father. Project Metaverse Alpha, a virtual real estate investment opportunity. Guaranteed returns of 200%. It was a Ponzi scheme, a classic textbook scam, and he was selling it to my parents as the golden ticket. He was telling them that if they leveraged the house and the small dry cleaning business my father owned, they could double their money in 6 months. He was feeding them to the wolves. I sat there staring at the screen. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My parents were not just mean. They were not just favoritist. They were vulnerable. They were stupid. They were about to sign away everything they had worked for because they were blinded by the whiteness and the suit of a man they desperately wanted to be successful. I had a choice, a clear moral fork in the road. Option 1. I drive back to the house. I show them this file. I play the hero. I save them from financial ruin. I expose Brad as the fraud he is. They might believe me. They might not. They might accuse me of forging the documents because I was jealous. They might hate me for bursting their bubble. But I would have saved them. Option 2. I do nothing. I let them sign the papers. I let them give the money to Brad. I let Brad lose it all because he would. And when the bank came to foreclose, when the loan sharks came looking for the rest, I would watch them burn. But then a third option formed in my mind. A colder, sharper option. An option that didn't just save them or destroy them, but enslaved them. If Brad was desperate for a lender, and my parents were desperate to give him money, the debt was going to be created one way or another. The paper was going to be signed. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer, Sterling. It was Sunday, but Sterling answered for me. "Nia," he said, "I heard about the church service. You are trending on local Twitter." "Forget the church," I said. "I need you to set up a shell company. Delaware registration. Anonymity is paramount. Call it Chimera Holdings. Done. What are we buying? Distressed debt, I said. My brother-in-law is about to convince my parents to take out a high-risk private loan against their commercial and residential properties. He is using a shady broker because no traditional bank will touch him. I want you to find that broker. I waited a beat, watching a seagull pick at a discarded fry in the parking lot. I want you to buy the note Sterling. I want Chimera Holdings to be the lender. Sterling was silent for a moment. He was a shark, but even he paused at the implications. You want to hold the mortgage on your parents' house? I want to own the paper I corrected. I want to be the one they write the check to every month. And when they default, because they will default, I want to be the one who decides whether to foreclose. This is nuclear Nia. If you do this, you hold their lives in your hands. They tried to take my car Sterling. They tried to take my dignity. They tried to use God to shake me down for cash. I am simply securing my investment. Okay. Sterling said, his voice shifting to business mode. I will find the broker. If Brad is as desperate as you say, the broker is likely predatory. He will be happy to offload the risk to a private equity firm for a quick fee. We can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. Do it, I said. And Sterling. Yes, make sure the terms are strict. One missed payment, and we accelerate the loan. I want the trigger to be hair trigger sensitive. Understood. I hung up the phone. I looked at the file on my iPad one last time. I looked at the picture of Brad smiling his winning smile, the smile that had fooled my sister and my parents. He thought he was a player. He thought he was moving pieces on a board. He didn't realize he was already in checkmate. I started the car. The engine purred, a sound of power and precision. I wasn't going back to the church. I wasn't going back to beg for their love. I was going back to my penthouse to watch the game play out. My parents were about to walk into a trap set by their own greed and their own blindness. And I wasn't going to warn them. I was going to be the one to spring it. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward the city. The skyline rose up before me, glittering and hard. I fit in there. I understood the rules of steel and glass. My family wanted to play with money fine. I would teach them the first rule of finance: never bet what you cannot afford to lose. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The hurt was gone. The anger had crystallized into strategy. I tapped the steering wheel in time to the music. Tomorrow, Brad would pitch his big project. My parents would sign their names on the dotted line. They would think they were investing in the future. In reality, they were signing their souls over to me, and I couldn't wait to collect. The following evening, I pulled up to my parents' house. The driveway was already occupied by a rented BMW that Brad had clearly acquired to project an image of solvency he did not possess. I wasn't there because I wanted to be. I was there because my father had sent a text message that simply read, "Come home, or we cut you off forever." It was a bluff, of course. They had already cut me off emotionally years ago. But I needed to witness the crime scene before the bodies were buried. I needed to see them sign their own death warrant. Inside, the living room had been transformed into a makeshift boardroom. Brad stood in front of a portable whiteboard he had set up near the television. He was sweating, his tie loosened, a laser pointer shaking slightly in his hand. My parents sat on the sofa looking up at him with expressions of desperate hope. Ebony was taking notes, playing the role of the diligent secretary to her husband's visionary genius. When I entered, no one greeted me. My father just pointed to a hard wooden chair in the corner. "Sit down, Nia. Brad is explaining the future." I sat. I crossed my legs and watched the performance. Brad clicked a button on a remote, and a laptop screen cast a blurry image onto the wall. It was a rendering of a digital island glowing with neon purples and greens. "Welcome to Paradise Nexus," Brad announced, his voice pitching up an octave. "This is not just real estate. This is the metaverse. We are talking about virtual luxury resorts where users buy plots of land using Ethereum. The initial coin offering starts next month." He pointed the laser at a pixelated beach. I have secured an exclusive allocation for early investors, he continued. We are looking at a guaranteed 200% return in the first quarter. Conservative estimates put us at 500% by Christmas. This is how we get the house in Oakbrook. This is how we retire Marcus. This is generational wealth. My mother clasped her hands together, her eyes shining. It sounds wonderful, Brad. It sounds like a miracle. It is a miracle, Beatrice Brad said, flashing his salesman smile, but miracles require faith. And seed capital. To lock in this rate, we need to move fast. The window closes at midnight. My father nodded slowly, stroking his chin. He looked at me. He wanted me to be impressed. He wanted me to see that his son-in-law was the titan of industry I refused to be. Nia, my father said, do you see this? This is vision. This is what a real businessman looks like. I looked at the screen. It was a template. I recognized the graphics package. It was a $20 asset pack from a stock image site. There was no blockchain. There was no development team. There was just Brad. A gambling addiction and a desperate need for liquidity. It is a Ponzi scheme, I said. The room went quiet. Brad's smile faltered. Excuse me, he said. It is a scam, Brad. There is no metaverse resort. You are selling unregistered securities for a project that does not exist. The returns you are promising are mathematically impossible unless you are paying old investors with new money. Ebony stood up, throwing her notepad down. Stop it, Nia. You are just jealous because Brad has a big idea and you are just a number cruncher. I am not jealous, I said calmly. I am literate. Show me the white paper. Show me the smart contract audit. Show me the developer credentials. Brad waved his hand dismissively. You would not understand the technicals, Nia. This is Web 3. It is beyond traditional finance. My father stood up. He walked over to the coffee table where a stack of documents lay waiting. He picked up a thick packet and held it out to me. We did not call you here to critique, he said. We called you here to sign. Sign what? This is a loan application, he said, for $200,000. We are investing in Brad's company. We are going to be the primary shareholders. But the bank requires a guarantor with a certain credit score and verified income history to fast-track the approval. Since you claim to have bought that car legitimately, your credit must be sufficient. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted me to co-sign a loan. They wanted me to attach my name, my credit, and my financial reputation to a scam that was going to implode within 90 days. You want me to guarantee a loan for a fake company, I asked? It is for the family, my mother pleaded. When the returns come in, we will pay off the loan in a month. You will not have to pay a dime. We just need your signature to get the funds released tonight. I stood up. Absolutely not. Nia, my father warned, his voice dropping to that dangerous register. I am not signing that, Dad. I am not going to help you ruin yourselves. Brad is lying to you. He is drowning in debt. He owes money to people who break legs for a living. He is trying to use your credit to pay off his bookies. Liar, Brad screamed. He lunged toward me but stopped short, panting. She is lying, Marcus. She is trying to sabotage me. She hates that I am successful. She hates that I married Ebony. My father stepped between us. He towered over me, his eyes full of a cold, ancient fury. Sign the paper, Nia. No, he slapped me. It was harder than my mother's slap. It knocked my head to the side. I tasted blood instantly where my tooth cut my inner cheek. The room spun for a second. I touched my lip and looked at my hand. A smear of red. I looked back at him. He didn't look sorry. He looked righteous. You are a small, bitter woman, he spat. You are jealous of him. You are jealous because he is a white man who knows how the world works, and you are just a little girl playing dress-up in a penthouse. You think your money makes you better than him. He has potential. You have nothing but arrogance. He pointed to the door. Get out. You are not my daughter. I disown you. Do not come back when we are rich. Do not ask us for a penny. I wiped the blood from my lip. I looked at my mother. She was looking at the floor. I looked at Ebony. She was smiling. I picked up my purse. "You are right, Dad," I said softly. "I am not your daughter anymore." I walked out of the house. I did not run. I walked with the steady, measured pace of an executioner leaving the cell. I got into my Porsche. I locked the doors. I picked up my phone and dialed Sterling. "They kicked me out," I said. "I am sorry," Nia Sterling replied. "Don't be. Is the broker ready?" "He is standing by. He has the papers for the private hard money loan, high interest. The house and the dry cleaning business are the collateral." "Send him in," I said. "Are you sure?" Sterling asked. "Once they sign this, there is no going back. If they miss a payment, you own everything." I touched my swelling lip. I looked at the house one last time. I saw the shadows of my parents moving in the living room, listening to Brad, believing in the fairy tale because they hated the reality of me. "They made their choice," I said. "Send the broker. Make sure they sign tonight." I hung up and started the car. I drove to the end of the block and parked in the shadows. I watched. 10 minutes later, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. A man in a cheap suit got out carrying a briefcase. It was the predatory lender Sterling had found. The man who fronted for Chimera Holdings. The man who fronted for me. I watched my father open the door. I saw him shake the man's hand. I saw them usher him inside with the desperation of drowning people reaching for an anchor, not realizing it was made of lead. They were doing it. They were bypassing the bank, bypassing the credit checks, and signing a high-risk private mortgage agreement because they believed Brad's lie. They were putting the house I grew up in and the business that fed us on the table, and they were handing the knife to me. I waited until the silver sedan left nearly an hour later. The deed was done. The ink was dry. I drove back to the city. My face throbbed, but the pain was distant like a memory of a sensation. I went to my office. I logged into the secure portal for Chimera Holdings. There it was, the scanned document uploaded by the broker. The Wilson Family Trust securing a loan of $200,000 at 18% interest payable in full in 6 months, with monthly installments that I knew they could barely afford. I scrolled to the bottom. I traced the signatures on the screen. Marcus Wilson, Beatrice Wilson. I owned them. I leaned back in my chair and watched the city lights. They thought they were investing in the metaverse. They thought they were buying a mansion. They had just sold their lives to the daughter they disowned. And the first payment was due in 30 days. I would be counting the seconds. The funds from the private loan hit my parents' bank account at 9 in the morning on Tuesday. By 10:30, that money was gone, transferred into an account controlled by Brad. My father thought he was funding the seed round for a revolutionary metaverse platform. My mother thought she was securing her retirement. I sat in my office at Aurora FinTech watching the digital trail through the forensic updates Vance was sending me in real time. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, except I was the one who had paved the road. Brad did not pay off the loan sharks immediately. That would have been the smart thing to do. That would have been the survival move. But Brad was not a survivor. He was a narcissist with a hole in his soul, where his self-esteem should have been. He needed to be seen winning more than he needed to actually win. At noon, a notification popped up on my sister's Instagram. It was a video story. Ebony was squealing, the camera shaking as she panned over the interior of a dealership. Not a Porsche dealership. An exotic rental agency near the airport that leased cars to rappers for music videos and desperate men trying to look rich for a weekend. Brad had rented a lime green Lamborghini Huracan. I watched him rev the engine in the video wearing sunglasses indoors, shouting about how the hustle never sleeps. He wasn't buying it. He was renting an illusion at $2,000 a day, using my parents' home equity to pay for the gas. By 2 p.m., they were at the mall. Ebony posted a photo of 3 Louis Vuitton bags and a new pair of red bottom heels. The caption read, "Hubby treats me like a queen." So blessed to have a man who provides. I zoomed in on the photo. I could see the price tag peeking out of one of the bags. $3,000. They had blown through 5 grand in an afternoon on accessories, while the interest on the high-risk loan I now held was already accruing by the hour. They were eating the seed corn. They were burning the furniture to heat the house in the middle of summer. And then came the invitation. It wasn't sent to me directly. I saw it on Facebook because my aunt, who didn't know I had been excommunicated from the family, yet tagged me in the comments. Celebrating the launch of Paradise Nexus Family BBQ and pool party at the Wilson residence. Toasting to the future. They were throwing a party, a victory lap. They were celebrating the successful swindling of my parents with a party funded by the very money they had stolen. And I wasn't invited. I pulled up the security camera feed for my parents' house. I had installed the system for them 2 years ago as a Christmas gift, insisting on the high-end package with remote access because the neighborhood was getting rough. They had never changed the password. They probably didn't even know how. I watched on my monitor as the catering van pulled up. Not homemade potato salad and burgers this time. They had hired a private chef. A bartender was setting up a station on the patio. Brad was strutting around the backyard in a linen suit, barking orders at the staff, pointing at the pool where floating lights were being installed. My father was sitting on the patio furniture holding a glass of scotch. He looked relieved. He looked proud. He thought he had backed a winner. He thought he had put me in my place by betting on the man who looked the part. My mother was showing Ebony's new purse to a neighbor, beaming with the vicarious thrill of consumption. They were drunk on the fantasy. Around 7 p.m. the notifications started rolling in. They weren't just celebrating, they were targeting me. Brad posted a picture of the Lamborghini parked in my parents' driveway, right where my Porsche had been 2 nights ago. The caption was a direct shot. Real power doesn't need to be loud, but sometimes you have to remind people who the king is. Hatch, empire building, Hamsh, family. First. Then Ebony posted a group photo. The whole family was gathered around the fire pit holding glasses of champagne. My parents, Brad, Ebony, and a few cousins who had always taken their side. They were laughing. It was a picture of perfect exclusionary happiness. The caption made my blood turn to ice. So grateful for a family that sticks together. No toxicity allowed in this circle. We cut off the dead weight and look how we soared. Money can't buy class, and it definitely can't buy loyalty. Here is to the real ones. Dead weight. I was the dead weight. The daughter who had bailed them out for a decade. The daughter who had bought the security cameras that were recording their betrayal. I was the toxicity they had removed so they could enjoy the pure, unfiltered joy of spending borrowed money on a lie. I sat in the silence of my office. The city of Chicago sprawled out beneath me, a grid of amber and white lights. I looked at the photo again. I looked at my father's smile. It was the smile of a man who believed he had won a great victory. He believed he had disciplined his unruly daughter and rewarded his faithful son. He didn't know the ground beneath his feet had already been sold. I turned away from the social media feed and opened my secure email client. A message from Sterling had just arrived. The subject line was simply, "Transaction complete." I opened the attachment. It was the transfer deed and the assignment of the note. The predatory lender had been all too happy to sell the debt to Chimera Holdings for a quick profit. He didn't want to deal with the inevitable foreclosure. He just wanted his fee. I clicked on the PDF. I saw the legal language dense and unforgiving. Assignment of mortgage. Borrower Marcus and Beatrice Wilson. Lender Chimera Holdings, LLC. I scrolled to the signature page. It was signed by my authorized proxy. But the ownership structure led back to one place: me. I was no longer just their daughter. I was their bank. I was the entity that held the power to strip them of everything they owned. The house they were partying and the patio they were standing on the roof over their heads. It all belonged to me now. The lease on their lives was in my hands. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, the leather cool against my skin. The feeling wasn't happiness. It wasn't joy. It was a cold, heavy satisfaction. It was the feeling of a chess player who sees mate in 3 moves while the opponent is still celebrating taking a pawn. They were drinking champagne on the deck of the Titanic, and I was the iceberg. My intercom buzzed, interrupting the silence. Ms. Wilson. It was Sarah, my executive assistant, working late as always. Yes, Sarah. A courier just arrived. He said it is urgent. It is an invitation. Bring it in. Sarah entered the office, her heels soft on the plush carpet. She handed me a thick cream-colored envelope with gold leaf lettering. It was heavy, expensive stock. The kind of invitation that announced power before you even opened it. I slid a letter opener under the seal. The Chicago Business Leaders Association cordially invites you to the annual Entrepreneur of the Year Gala. I scanned the card. It was the premier business event of the season. The mayor would be there, the governors of finance, the titans of industry. And there, in bold embossed letters near the bottom, keynote speaker, Nia Wilson, founder, and CFO, Aurora FinTech. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in days. This gala was the place to be seen. It was the kind of event Brad would kill to attend. It was the kind of room where he could hunt for investors to pay off the sharks he was still dodging. I knew with absolute certainty that he would try to be there. He would spend the last of the loan money on scalped tickets or bribe a waiter to let him in the back door. He needed fresh blood. He needed a new mark. And he would bring my parents. He would drag them along as props, the respectable older couple, to vouch for his character, to prove he was a family man. They would walk into that ballroom thinking they were rubbing elbows with the elite. They would think they were about to level up. They had no idea that the keynote speaker was the daughter they had called a failure. They had no idea that the woman on stage, the woman being honored as the future of finance, was the dead weight they had cut loose. I looked at the monitor one last time. Brad was doing a toast, raising his glass to the camera on the security feed, oblivious to the audience of one. Cheers, Brad, I whispered. Enjoy the champagne. It is the last expensive drink you are ever going to have. I put the invitation on my desk, right next to the mortgage deed. The trap was set. The players were in position. All that was left was to turn on the lights and watch them scramble. I picked up my pen and circled the date of the gala. Saturday, 3 days. I would let them have their fun for 3 more days. I would let them spend the money. I would let them dig the hole so deep they could never climb out. And then on Saturday night, in front of the entire city, I would bury them. The Saturday night air was thick with humidity and the scent of expensive perfume as I stepped out of the black town car in front of the Palmer House Hilton. The Entrepreneur of the Year Gala was the kind of event where net worth was measured in billions, and influence was the only currency that truly mattered. I smoothed the fabric of my emerald silk gown, a custom piece that cost more than the tuition my parents had stolen from me, and walked toward the revolving brass doors. I wasn't just an attendee tonight. I was the main event. But before I took my place on the stage, I needed to see them. I needed to witness the depth of their delusion one last time. I scanned the ballroom from the shadows of the entrance archway. It was a sea of tuxedos and designer dresses, a shifting landscape of power dynamics and social climbing. And there, bobbing like corks in a hurricane, was my family. Brad led the way, his chest puffed out in a rented tuxedo that was a size too small in the shoulders. He walked with the frantic energy of a man who knows the clock is ticking. Ebony clung to his arm, wearing a sequined dress that caught the light in a way that screamed desperation rather than elegance. My parents, Marcus and Beatrice, trailed behind them, looking like deer caught in headlights. They were out of their element, overwhelmed by the opulence clutching their invitations like life rafts. I watched as they approached the check-in desk. I saw the hostess frown at their tickets. These were not VIP passes. These were scalped general admission tickets, likely purchased from a third-party vendor, at a markup that would make a loan shark blush. I watched the hostess gesture toward the far corner of the room near the swinging doors of the service kitchen. Table 49, the table for last-minute additions and people who didn't matter. They sat down trying to maintain their composure. Brad immediately started scanning the room, his eyes darting around like a predator looking for a wounded gazelle. He wasn't here to enjoy the dinner. He was here to hunt. He needed a check. He needed a lifeline. He leaned in, whispering aggressively to my father, probably pointing out potential targets. My father nodded, fixing his tie, trying to look like the businessman he pretended to be. I took a deep breath and stepped into the light. I walked through the center of the room. The crowd parted slightly. People knew me here, not as Nia the disappointment, but as Ms. Wilson, the woman who had just orchestrated the most aggressive fintech merger of the decade. A few heads nodded in respect. A few glasses were raised. I acknowledged them with a subtle inclination of my head, but I kept moving toward table 49. Brad saw me first. His eyes bulged. For a second, I saw fear. He thought I was there to cause a scene to get him thrown out. But then, his narcissism kicked in. He processed my dress, the diamonds at my throat, the way I carried myself. And he came to the only conclusion his small mind could comprehend. He nudged Ebony. She looked up, her mouth falling open. I walked right up to their table. I didn't stop until I was standing directly over them. "Well," I said, "this is a surprise." Brad let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked around the table, inviting them to share in the joke. "Look who snuck in," he sneered, his voice loud enough to turn heads at the adjacent tables. "I didn't know they let the help dress up tonight. Who did you have to sleep with to get past security?" Nia Ebony covered her mouth, giggling. "Oh my God, Nia, you look ridiculous. Are you working the coat check? Or are you here to find a sponsor for your car payments?" My mother looked at me with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. "Nia, please, do not make a scene. If you are here to serve drinks, just go, do your job. We are trying to network with important people." My father refused to even look at me. He stared at the centerpiece, his jaw tight. "I told you," he muttered. "She has no shame." I looked at Brad. He was so confident. He was sitting in a chair that I had paid for, wearing a suit rented with money he stole from my parents, mocking the woman who held the deed to his existence. "I am not working, Brad," I said calmly. "I am attending." He snorted. "Attending, right. Did you buy a ticket with your imaginary salary, or are you someone's +1 that has to be it? You found some old guy to drag you along. That is pathetic, Nia. Even for you." He stood up, adjusting his lapels. "We have real business to do," he announced, dismissing me. "Stay out of our way. Do not embarrass us when I am closing a deal." He turned his back on me and walked toward a man standing near the bar. I recognized the man immediately. It was Arthur Sterling, the chairman of the bank that Brad had been trying to defraud for months. It was also the bank that my company did 60% of its business with. I watched, fascinated. Brad approached Sterling with his hand extended, flashing that used car salesman smile. "Mr. Sterling," Brad said, his voice oozing charm. "Brad Miller, Project Metaverse. I sent you the prospectus. I think we have a lot of synergy." Sterling looked at Brad's hand, then at his face. He didn't shake it. He looked at Brad with the kind of cold indifference usually reserved for insects. "I received your emails," Mr. Miller, Sterling said. His voice was dry as dust. "My security team flagged them as spam. I believe you are on our do not service list due to outstanding liabilities." Brad's smile froze. "There must be a mistake. I am managing the Wilson Family Trust. We have significant equity." Sterling laughed. It was a terrifying sound. "The Wilson Family Trust has a credit score of 450 and a debt-to-income ratio that is mathematically impressive in its failure." "Excuse me." Sterling turned away, leaving Brad standing there with his hand still extended. Brad looked around, his face burning red. He saw me watching. He saw the slight smile playing on my lips. He stormed back to the table. "They are all snobs," he hissed to my father. "They do not understand vision. We just need to find the right partner. He glared at me. Why are you still standing here? Go find your sugar daddy and leave us alone. I looked at my watch. It was time. Enjoy the dinner, I said. I hear the chicken is dry. I turned and walked away. I didn't go back to the entrance. I walked toward the stage. I walked past the VIP tables in the front row. I walked up the stairs to the wings where the stage manager was waiting for me with a headset and a glass of water. Ms. Wilson, he whispered. You are on in 2 minutes. I watched from the darkness of the wings. The house lights began to dim. A hush fell over the ballroom. The spotlights swept across the crowd, blinding and bright. I saw table 49 in the distance. I saw Brad pouring himself a glass of wine with a shaking hand. I saw my mother clutching her purse. I saw my father looking around, waiting to see who the important speaker was, hoping he could maybe shake their hand later and beg for a loan. They were waiting for a savior. They were waiting for a miracle. The master of ceremonies walked out to the center of the stage. He tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed. Tonight we honor innovation. We honor resilience. We honor the kind of vision that changes industries. Brad leaned in to whisper something to Ebony, probably a critique of the decor. He wasn't listening. He didn't care. It is my distinct privilege, the MC continued to introduce our keynote speaker. A woman who built a financial empire from nothing. A woman who just closed the largest tech acquisition in Chicago history. The founder and CFO of Aurora FinTech. The spotlight swung toward the curtain where I was standing. Please welcome Ms. Nia Wilson. I stepped out. The applause was thunderous. It washed over me like a physical wave, but I didn't hear it. All I could see was table 49. I saw the moment the name registered. I saw Brad drop his wine glass. It shattered on the table, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like a gunshot wound. I saw my mother grab her chest. I saw my father stand up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, his face a mask of absolute paralyzing shock. I walked to the podium. I gripped the sides. I looked out into the darkness directly at the people who had called me a failure, a whore, and a thief. I smiled. And this time it was the only smile in the room. The applause washed over me like a physical wave, a thunderous roar that vibrated through the floorboards of the stage and up into the soles of my heels. I stood in the center of the spotlight, the heat of it intense against my skin, blinding me to everything but the front row and the terrified faces at table 49. I adjusted the microphone. The sound of my breathing was amplified, filling the cavernous ballroom. I looked out at the sea of faces, the titans of Chicago industry, the mayors, the venture capitalists, the people who ran this city. They were all looking at me with admiration. They saw a prodigy, they saw a leader. But I only cared about 4 people in that room. I looked past the VIPs. I looked past the champagne buckets and the centerpieces. My gaze locked onto the far corner near the kitchen doors. Brad was still frozen, his hand suspended in midair where his wine glass used to be. The red stain was spreading across the white tablecloth in front of him, dripping onto his rented trousers, but he did not move. His mouth was open, slack with a stupidity that was almost painful to witness. He was processing the impossible. The woman he had called a secretary, the woman he had tried to have thrown out of her own lobby, was the woman whose name was currently projected on a 20-foot screen behind me. My mother Beatrice had sunk low in her chair. She looked small. The hat she had worn to church to shame me was gone, replaced by a stiff, dated hairdo that now seemed to wilt under the weight of the revelation. Her hand was over her mouth, stifling a gasp or a sob, I could not tell which. She was looking at me, not as her daughter, but as a stranger who had stolen her daughter's face and replaced it with something terrifying. And my father, Marcus, the deacon, the man who ruled his household with an iron fist and a Bible of convenient verses. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard I could see his knuckles turning white from 50 feet away. His face was a mask of ash. He wasn't angry. He wasn't righteous. He was afraid. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine primal fear in my father's eyes. He realized in that split second that the balance of power had not just shifted, it had been obliterated. I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf that has cornered a rabbit. "Thank you," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and commanded absolute silence in the room. "Thank you to the Business Leaders Association for this honor. To be named Entrepreneur of the Year is a privilege. But to stand here as the founder of Aurora FinTech, a company that just secured the future of digital banking in the Midwest, is a testament to one thing: survival." I paused. I let the word hang in the air. Survival. I did not start this company with a trust fund. I continued, my eyes never leaving table 49. I did not start it with a small loan from my parents. I did not have a safety net. I did not have a legacy. The camera operator, sensing a moment of emotional vulnerability, panned the live feed to my family. Their faces appeared on the giant screens flanking the stage. The audience gasped softly, thinking they were seeing a family overcome with pride. They saw my mother's tears and thought they were tears of joy. They saw my father's trembling hands and thought it was emotion. They saw Brad's pale, sweating face and thought, well, I don't know what they thought about Brad. He looked like a man who was about to be sick. But I knew the truth. I knew they were crying because they were doing the math. They were calculating every insult, every slap, every stolen dollar, and realizing the bill had just come due. I started Aurora in a one-bedroom apartment with an internet connection I borrowed from a neighbor, I said, leaning into the microphone. I built the algorithm at night after working double shifts to pay off debts that were not mine. I learned the value of $1 not because I had many of them, but because the people who were supposed to protect me took them away. A hush fell over the room. This was not the standard acceptance speech. This was a confession. "We talk a lot about support systems in business," I said, walking out from behind the podium. I wanted them to see the full length of my gown. I wanted Ebony to see the diamonds. I wanted them to see exactly what they had thrown away. We thank our mentors. We thank our partners. But tonight I want to thank the people who really made this possible. I want to thank the people who taught me that if I did not save myself, no one would. I pointed directly at the screen at the live feed of my family. The audience turned to look. My father flinched as if I had pointed a gun at him. I want to thank the people who taught me that loyalty is expensive and betrayal is free. I want to thank the people who looked at me and saw nothing because their blindness gave me the freedom to build an empire in the dark. My mother buried her face in her hands. Ebony was shaking her head, mouthing the word no over and over again. "You see?" I continued, my voice dropping to a register of intimate steel. "When you are left at the airport, you learn to fly. When your tuition is stolen, you learn to earn. And when your family locks you out of the house, you learn to buy the block." There was a scattered, confused applause from the back, but most of the room was captivated. They sensed the drama. They sensed the blood in the water. Aurora FinTech is not just a company. It is a fortress. It is the answer to the question, what happens when you underestimate the quiet one? What happens when you mistake silence for weakness? I walked back to the podium. I picked up the heavy crystal award that had been placed there. It caught the light, refracting it into 1,000 sharp edges. This award belongs to the girl who scrubbed dishes while her sister went on vacation. It belongs to the woman who was called a failure by a man who couldn't balance his own checkbook. It belongs to the survivor. I looked at Brad. He was trying to stand up. He was trying to leave. But his legs wouldn't work. He was pinned to that chair by the weight of his own fraud and the realization that he had tried to extort the most powerful woman in the room. "Tonight we celebrate success," I said. "But let us not forget where success comes from. It comes from the hunger. It comes from the cold. And it comes from the absolute refusal to be a victim." I raised the award in a toast. I looked directly into the camera lens, knowing my face was 50 feet tall on the screen behind me, looming over them like a god. So to my family, I said, my voice ringing out like a bell. Thank you. Thank you for not believing in me. Thank you for the neglect. Thank you for the cruelty. Because without you, I might have been content to be ordinary. You forced me to be extraordinary. I took a sip of water from the glass on the podium. Cheers, I whispered into the mic. The room exploded. The applause was deafening. People were standing up. They thought it was a speech about resilience. They thought it was a metaphor. They didn't know it was an eviction notice. I stood there bathing in the applause, watching my family crumble on the high-definition screen. My father had his head in his hands. My mother was openly weeping, her makeup running in dark streaks down her face. Brad looked like he had stopped breathing. I had done it. I had stripped them naked in front of the elite. I had taken their shame and turned it into my crown. I walked off the stage. The stage manager was waiting with a towel, looking at me with awe. That was intense, Ms. Wilson, he said. It was necessary, I replied. I didn't stop backstage. I didn't go to the green room. I walked straight through the wings, down the corridor, and out into the main lobby of the hotel. I knew they would follow. I knew they couldn't help themselves. They were moths, and I was the fire. They would come to me begging, explaining, lying, and I would be waiting. I stood in the center of the lobby under the massive crystal chandelier. I checked my phone, a text from Sterling. All assets secured. The foreclosure notice is ready to be served. The FBI has the file on Brad. Just give the word. I put the phone away. I smoothed my dress. I waited. 5 minutes later, the double doors of the ballroom burst open. They spilled out like refugees from a disaster zone. Brad was leading, of course, his desperation giving him speed. My parents were right behind him, looking disheveled and frantic. Ebony was trailing, clutching her purse like it was the only thing holding her together. They saw me. They stopped. I stood there, the Queen of Chicago, holding the keys to their destruction in one hand and their salvation in the other. But I wasn't in the business of salvation anymore. I was in the business of liquidation. Hello, family, I said. I believe we have some business to discuss. The lobby of the Palmer House Hilton was a cathedral of gold leaf and marble, a fitting stage for the final act of a tragedy my family had been writing for 30 years. I stood near the fountain, the water cascading with a gentle rhythmic sound that failed to mask the rapid, desperate clicking of heels approaching me on the stone floor. I did not turn around. I watched their reflections in the glass of the concierge desk. They looked like a pack of wolves that had suddenly realized the sheep was actually a lion. Their posture had changed. Gone was the arrogance of the church service. Gone was the sneering superiority of the driveway. In its place was a frantic, terrifying eagerness. Nia. My mother called out. Her voice was pitchy, breathless. She sounded like she was greeting a long-lost friend at the airport, not the daughter she had slapped across the face 72 hours ago. She reached me first. She threw her arms open, aiming for an embrace. I took a single, precise step backward. Her arms closed on empty air. She stumbled slightly, catching herself on my father's arm. Oh, baby, she gushed, recovering instantly. She clasped her hands over her heart, her eyes swimming with fresh, happy tears. Did you see us? Did you see us watching you? We were crying. We were just sobbing. I turned to your father and I said, Marcus, look at her. Look at our girl. We knew it. We always knew you had this in you. I looked at her. The audacity was so physical it almost had a smell like rotting flowers. You knew, I repeated. My voice was flat. Is that why you called me a failure on Tuesday? Is that why you tried to sell my car? Oh, Nia, do not be like that, my father interjected. He stepped forward, putting a heavy hand on my shoulder. I shrugged it off immediately. He pulled his hand back as if he had been burned. We were hard on you, he admitted, putting on his best pastoral voice, the deep rumbling baritone he used to solicit tithes. But iron sharpens iron, daughter. We saw your potential. We knew you were drifting, focusing on the wrong things. We had to push you. We had to be the grit that made the pearl. And look at you now. You are a diamond. He beamed at me, waiting for me to thank him. He actually believed it. He was rewriting history in real time, convincing himself that his neglect and abuse were actually a masterclass in parenting. He wanted credit for my survival after he was the one who threw me overboard. We are just so proud, my mother added, reaching out to stroke the silk of my sleeve. She was checking the quality of the fabric. Founder, CFO. My goodness. Why did you hide it, honey? We could have celebrated you. We could have helped you. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. You stole my college fund to pay for a wedding. You tried to extort me for a down payment. The only thing you would have done with my company is liquidate it to buy Brad a boat. Brad cleared his throat. He pushed his way to the front of the circle. He had wiped the sweat from his forehead, but his eyes were still darting around, manic and greedy. He buttoned his tight jacket, trying to summon the ghost of the arrogance he had worn in my office lobby. Nia, look, he said, flashing a smile that was all teeth and panic. We got off on the wrong foot. Things were said, tempers flared. It is a high-stress environment, right? You know how it is. Finance is a contact sport. He laughed nervously. Nobody else did. But seeing you up there, he continued, gesturing vaguely toward the ballroom. It all makes sense now. The car, the attitude. You are a player. I respect that. Game recognizes game. I stared at him. He was actually trying to bond with me. And honestly, hearing about Aurora FinTech, I see a lot of synergy here, Brad said, his voice gaining speed. You are handling the tech side, the back end, the algorithms. That is great. But you need a face. You need strategy. You need someone who understands the street, the real markets. He took a step closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I am willing to come on board, Nia. I am willing to let bygones be bygones. My calendar is packed. Obviously, Project Metaverse is exploding, but for family, I can make space. I think a role like Chief Strategy Officer would be appropriate. Or maybe President of Global Operations. We could structure it with a mix of salary and equity. Keep it in the family. We would be unstoppable. I looked at Ebony. She was standing behind him, nodding vigorously. It is a great idea, Nia, she said. Brad is a genius with money. You guys could build a dynasty, and then we could all be together, like a real team. The delusion was absolute. They were standing in the lobby of a hotel they could not afford, wearing rented clothes, trying to negotiate a C-suite position in a company they did not understand, with a woman they had disowned 3 days prior. They really thought I was stupid. They thought I was so desperate for their love, so starved for their validation, that I would hand them the keys to the kingdom just because they smiled at me once. I looked at Brad. I looked at the way his eyes lingered on my diamond necklace. I looked at my father, who was already mentally spending my money on a new church wing. I looked at my mother, who was probably planning a shopping trip in her head. I am glad you brought up business, Brad, I said. Because that is actually why I stopped. Brad's face lit up. He thought he had me. He thought the hook was set. Great, he said, rubbing his hands together. Let us grab a drink. Let us talk numbers. I have some ideas about leveraging your current liquidity to double down on crypto. No drinks, I said. I reached into my clutch. I did not pull out a checkbook. I did not pull out a contract for a job offer. I pulled out a black leather folder. It was slim, elegant, and terrifying. Brad's smile faltered. What is that? This, I said, tapping the folder against my palm, is the only business we are ever going to do. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first document. It was a summary of debts. You see, Brad? I said, my voice conversational, pleasant. When you came to my office and called me a whore, I got curious. I wondered why a man with such a big deal closing needed to harass his sister-in-law for pocket change. So I hired a forensic accountant. Brad's face went the color of old milk. I know about the gambling, Brad. I know about the offshore accounts that are empty. I know about the loan sharks in Jersey who are charging you 10 points a week. And I know about the Ponzi scheme you tried to sell my parents. My father frowned. What are you talking about? Project Metaverse is a solid investment. It is a template you bought online for $20, Dad, I said, not looking away from Brad. There is no land. There is no code. There is just Brad taking your money to pay off the men who are threatening to break his legs. Lies, Brad squeaked. She is lying. She is trying to ruin me. I pulled out the next document. It was a printout of the wire transfer. $200,000, I read. Transferred from the Wilson Family Trust to an account in the Cayman Islands controlled by Bradford Miller on Tuesday morning, and then 2 hours later transferred to a sports betting site and a private lender named Silas. My mother grabbed Brad's arm. Brad. What is she saying? Where is the money? It is gone, Mom, I said. He spent it. He rented a Lamborghini and bought you a purse to keep you quiet while he set fire to your retirement. Brad tried to back away, but my father grabbed his shoulder. His grip was iron. Is this true? My father roared. It was an investment. Brad shouted, his voice cracking. The market turned. I was going to make it back. You are a thief, my father snarled. He looked like he was about to strike him, but I wasn't done. I held up a hand. Save your energy, Dad, I said, because Brad isn't the only one with a problem. I turned the page in the folder. I revealed the document they had signed in the dark, the document they thought was their salvation. You signed a loan agreement, I said. A hard money loan. $200,000. Collateralized by the house and the dry cleaning business. High interest. Immediate default clauses. We had to, my father said, his eyes darting between me and Brad. To fund the investment. Yes, I said. And do you know who bought that note? Do you know who holds the paper on your house right now? They stared at me. The silence in the lobby was deafening. The fountain seemed to roar. Brad looked at the folder. He looked at me, and for the first time he understood. No, he whispered. You didn't. I smiled. It was the smile of the executioner. I did. I closed the folder with a snap. I bought the debt, Dad. I am the lender. I own the mortgage. I own the shop, and according to the terms you signed, because the funds were used for illicit purposes, you are in default as of yesterday. My mother grabbed the counter of the concierge desk to steady herself. You own the house. I own everything, I said. And we are not talking about feelings anymore. We are not talking about family. We are not talking about repentance. I took a step forward and they all took a step back. We are talking about debt. And I am here to collect. I opened the black leather folder, completely laying it flat on the concierge desk, like a coroner preparing to perform an autopsy. The marble surface was cold under my fingertips. I looked at Brad, whose face had gone from the flush of arrogance to the pallor of a dead fish. He was sweating so profusely that his cheap hair dye was starting to run down his temple in a thin, inky stream. You want to know where the money went, Mom? I asked, not looking at her. I pulled out a spreadsheet color-coded in red. It was a forensic trace of the funds they had wired to Brad just 48 hours ago. Here it is. $200,000. Gone. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Gone. What do you mean, gone? It is in the investment account. Brad said it was locked in for the initial coin offering. It was never in an investment account, I said, sliding the paper toward her. It went to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. And from there, it went to 3 places. I pointed to the lines on the sheet. 50,000 to a crypto gambling site called LuckyBit. 75,000 to a private lender in New Jersey named Silas, who I assume is the man threatening to break Brad's kneecaps. And the rest, I looked at Ebony. She was clutching her new Louis Vuitton bag so hard her knuckles were white. The rest went to a luxury rental car agency and the Neiman Marcus at Oakbrook Center. You are wearing your retirement fund, Ebony. That dress, that bag. That is Mom and Dad's equity. That is the dry cleaning business. That is the roof over their heads. Ebony looked down at her dress as if it had suddenly caught fire. She dropped the bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. It is a Ponzi scheme, Dad, I said, turning to my father. There is no metaverse. There is no land. Brad has been paying off old investors with new money for 2 years. And when he ran out of strangers to scam, he came for you. He cannibalized his own family to keep the lights on for 1 more week. My father looked at Brad. The betrayal in his eyes was absolute. He had worshipped this man. He had elevated him above his own daughter because Brad fit the image of success he so desperately craved. And now he realized he had bet the farm on a con artist. You stole from me, my father whispered. His voice was shaking. I trusted you. I gave you everything. I didn't steal it. Brad screamed, his voice cracking. It was a loan. I was going to make it back. The market just crashed. I just needed more time. You don't have time, I said. And you don't have the money. I turned the page in the dossier. This was the moment. This was the kill shot. But the money isn't the worst part, I said softly. The worst part is the collateral. I pulled out the mortgage assignment. The document was stamped and notarized. It was ironclad. You signed a hard money loan, Dad. High interest, short term, callable on demand if the lender suspects fraud or misuse of funds. My father was breathing hard, his hand clutching his chest. We can pay it back, he stammered. We just need to sell the business. We have savings. You don't have savings, I corrected him. You gave your savings to Brad 3 months ago. I saw the bank records. And the business. It is already leveraged. This loan was the last straw. You are overextended, Marcus. You are insolvent. I picked up the document and held it up so he could read the header. Lender Chimera Holdings, LLC. He squinted at it. I don't know who that is. Yes, you do, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out a business card. It was black with gold lettering. Nia Wilson, CEO. Chimera Holdings. I dropped the card on top of the mortgage deed. I am Chimera Holdings' dad. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. My mother stopped breathing. Ebony let out a small, high-pitched whimper. Brad looked like he was trying to calculate the distance to the exit. I bought the debt, I said, my voice calm, precise, and utterly cold. I bought the note from your predatory broker this morning. I own the paper on your house. I own the lien on the dry cleaning shop. I own every brick, every shingle, and every blade of grass at 42 Maple Street. My father staggered back. He grabbed the edge of a velvet chair to keep from falling. You own my house. It is not your house anymore, I said. It is my asset. And since I have proof, thanks to my forensic team, that the funds from this loan were used for illegal gambling and fraud, you are in default. Effective immediately. I took a step toward him. He looked small. He looked old. The giant who had terrified me my entire childhood was gone, replaced by a foolish old man who had been outsmarted by his own prejudices. Do you remember Tuesday night, Dad? I asked. Do you remember what you said to me? You told me to get out. You told me I wasn't your daughter because I wouldn't give you money. You kicked me out of the home I grew up in. I leaned in close. I wanted him to see the fire in my eyes. Well, now I am the landlord, and I have a very strict policy against tenants who assault me. I pulled a folded piece of paper from the back of the folder. It was a notice to vacate. You have 30 days, Marcus. 30 days to pack your boxes. 30 days to find a new place to live. And since you have no credit, no savings, and a mountain of debt, I suggest you start looking for a very small apartment. Maybe Brad can let you sleep in the Lamborghini before he has to return it. My father made a choking sound. His face turned a terrifying shade of gray. He clutched his chest with both hands, his knees buckling. My heart, he gasped. Beatrice. My heart. He slumped into the chair, gasping for air. It was a mild angina attack brought on by the shock of his own hubris. I had seen him do this before when the church deacon board voted against him. It was real pain, but it was also theater. My mother shrieked. She looked at him, then at me, and then her eyes rolled back in her head. She swooned, collapsing onto the carpet in a heap of taffeta and fake pearls. It was a perfect faint. Too perfect. She made sure to land on the thick rug, not the marble. Mom, Dad, Ebony screamed, dropping to her knees beside them. Nia, look what you did. You are killing them. Help them. Call 911. I looked down at them, my father gasping and clutching his chest. My mother playing dead on the floor, my sister wailing like a banshee. I didn't move. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't kneel. I stepped over my mother's legs. I walked past my father's chair. I am not calling anyone, I said. You wanted independence. You wanted to cut me off. Consider it done. You can handle your own emergencies. I walked toward the revolving doors. Behind me, the chaos was escalating. Hotel staff were rushing over. Guests were staring. But I didn't look back. And then the sound of sirens cut through the night air. Blue and red lights flashed against the glass of the hotel entrance. I stopped and smiled. I hadn't called an ambulance. I had called the FBI. The doors burst open and 6 agents in windbreakers marched into the lobby. They weren't looking for a heart attack victim. They were looking for a white-collar criminal. They walked right past me. They walked right past my parents on the floor. They walked straight to Brad, who was trying to blend into the wallpaper. Bradford Miller, the lead agent, barked. Brad tried to run. He actually tried to bolt toward the kitchen, but he tripped over his own feet and went down hard. 2 agents were on him instantly. I watched as they hauled him up. I watched as they slapped the handcuffs on his wrists. The metal clicked shut with a sound that was sweeter than any music. You are under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering, the agent recited. Brad was screaming. Ebony was screaming. My father was moaning. My mother miraculously woke up from her faint to start wailing. I stood in the doorway, the cool night air hitting my face. I watched them dragging Brad away. I watched my family disintegrating into a pile of rubble. I checked my watch. 9 p.m. I had a reservation for a late dinner at a steakhouse with my team. We had a merger to celebrate. I turned my back on the wreckage of the Wilson family and walked out into the city. I was an orphan now, and I had never felt so rich. The metal cuffs clicked shut on Brad's wrists with a finality that echoed through the marble lobby of the Palmer House Hilton. It was a sound I would remember for the rest of my life, sharper than the clinking of champagne glasses, louder than the applause that had greeted me on stage. The FBI agents were efficient, their movements practiced and devoid of emotion. They pulled Brad to his feet, handling him not like the financial visionary he pretended to be, but like the common criminal he was. "You cannot do this!" Brad shouted, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeal of panic. "I know my rights. This is a misunderstanding. I need to call my lawyer." You do not have a lawyer, Brad, I thought. You have a public defender in your future. One of the agents began reading him his rights, the Miranda warning cutting through the stunned silence of the hotel lobby. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Ebony found her voice then. She did not look at her husband, the man who had lied to her and spent her future on rental cars and gambling. She looked at me. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure distilled hatred. "You did this!" she screamed, lunging toward me. A hotel security guard stepped in front of her, blocking her path with a raised hand. "You ruined us. You called them. How could you do this to your own family?" I did not flinch. I did not step back. I did not defraud investors. "Ebony," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "I did not steal $200,000 from our parents. I did not forge loan documents. Brad did that. I just turned on the lights." "You are evil," she sobbed, collapsing against the concierge desk as the agents began marching Brad toward the exit. "You are jealous and you are evil. We were going to be happy. We were going to have everything. You were going to be homeless in 3 months when the loan sharks came to collect," I said. "At least in federal prison, Brad will have a roof over his head." My parents were still on the floor, huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. My father was clutching his chest, his breathing ragged, but the medical emergency had clearly passed the moment the handcuffs appeared. Now he was just a man watching his legacy dissolve. He looked at Brad being hauled away, then at me standing untouched in my emerald gown. The cognitive dissonance was breaking him. He could not reconcile the daughter he had discarded with the woman who had just orchestrated the dismantling of his world. As the automatic doors slid shut behind the agents and Brad, the silence returned to the lobby. But it was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a judgment rendered. I turned and walked out the side exit to my waiting car. I did not offer them a ride. I did not offer them money for a cab. They had to figure it out. That was the lesson they had tried to teach me for years. Now they could learn it themselves. The fallout was swift and brutal. By the time the sun rose over Chicago the next morning, the news had spread from the business pages to the community gossip mills. The arrest of a local businessman at the Entrepreneur of the Year gala was juicy enough, but the involvement of Deacon Wilson's son-in-law made it a scandal of biblical proportions. I did not have to lift a finger to spread the word. The church choir network was more efficient than fiber optic cables. By 9 a.m. on Sunday, everyone at Greater Hope Baptist Church knew that Marcus Wilson had bet the family fortune on a fraudster and lost. They knew he had tried to shake down his own daughter from the pulpit. They knew the police had been involved. My father went to church that morning. It was a mistake. He thought he could brazen it out. He thought his title and his years of service would shield him. He walked into the sanctuary wearing his best suit, his head held high, expecting the usual deference. Instead, he was met by the senior pastor and the entire board of deacons standing at the entrance to the nave. They did not let him pass. Brother Wilson, the senior pastor, said, his voice sorrowful but firm, "We need to speak in my office." I was not there, but Mrs. Gable, the usher, who had once seated me in the front row, told me everything later. She said the meeting lasted 10 minutes. She said my father shouted about loyalty and betrayal. She said the board presented him with the police report regarding the misuse of funds and the association with known gambling syndicates. A deacon must be above reproach, the pastor had told him. You have brought scandal to this house. My father walked out of that office stripped of his title. He was no longer Deacon Wilson. He was just Marcus, a man who had been conned by his own greed. He walked past the congregation, past the people who used to look up to him, and they turned their faces away. The shame was absolute. It was the social death he had always feared more than physical death. But the financial death was happening simultaneously. While my father was being defrocked, my lawyer Sterling was executing the final phase of the plan. The default on the hard money loan was triggered the moment the funds were used for illegal activities. The contract was explicit. Fraud constituted an immediate breach. There was no grace period. There was no remediation. At noon on Monday, a locksmith and a sheriff's deputy arrived at 42 Maple Street. I was not there. I did not need to see it. I had the report sent to me later. My mother opened the door. She was wearing a bathrobe, her eyes swollen from 2 days of crying. When she saw the sheriff, she tried to slam the door, but he blocked it with his boot. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, "I have a court order for immediate possession of the property on behalf of the lender Chimera Holdings. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." 24 hours, she shrieked. "You cannot do this. We have lived here for 30 years. My daughter will stop this. Call Nia. She owns the company." The sheriff looked at his paperwork. "The owner of record is Chimera Holdings. They have instructed us to secure the property. You need to start packing, ma'am, or we will pack for you." They spent the next day frantically throwing their lives into garbage bags. Ebony was there helping them, her designer clothes stained with sweat and dust. They did not have money for movers. They did not have money for a storage unit. They had to take only what they could fit into my father's sedan and Ebony's leased SUV, which was likely next on the repossession list. They called me. Of course they called me. My phone logged 47 calls in 3 hours. I did not answer a single one. I sat in my office watching the stock ticker for Aurora FinTech, which had jumped 12% since the gala. I was making millions while they were fighting over who got to keep the blender. The locksmith changed the tumblers on the front door at exactly noon on Tuesday. The sheriff placed a neon orange sticker on the front window. Property seized. No trespassing. My parents stood on the sidewalk surrounded by black trash bags filled with clothes and photo albums. The neighbors, the people they had tried so hard to impress for decades, watched from behind their curtains. There was no dignity in it. There was no grace. It was just the ugly, raw reality of consequences catching up to bad decisions. They had no place to go. Brad was in a holding cell, unable to make bail because his assets were frozen, and his family had finally realized he was a liability. The luxury rental had been towed. The dream of the mansion in Oak Brook was dust. They ended up at the Starlight Motel on the edge of town, a place known for hourly rates and flickering neon signs. It was the only place that would take cash and didn't ask for a credit check. I drove by it a week later just to see. It was a low, dingy building with peeling paint and a parking lot full of rusted cars. My father's sedan was parked in front of room 12. It looked out of place, a relic of a life they used to have. I saw my mother sitting in the window, staring out at the highway. She looked older. The artifice of her suburban life had been stripped away, leaving a tired, broken woman who had bet on the wrong child. Ebony was working at a grocery store 3 miles away. I knew this because Vance had kept tabs on them. She was scanning items, bagging groceries for people she used to look down on. The golden child was learning the value of $1 the hard way. I parked across the street and watched the motel for a long time. I thought I would feel triumph. I thought I would feel a surge of victory. But all I felt was a quiet, heavy finality. They were in a prison of their own making. I had just locked the door. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel of the Porsche. They were steady. I had done what I had to do. I had protected myself. I had stopped the cycle of abuse. I put the car in gear and drove away. I didn't speed. I didn't blast music. I just drove, leaving the Starlight Motel and the ruins of the Wilson family in my rearview mirror. They had wanted me to pay for their lifestyle. Instead, they paid for my freedom. And the price was everything they had. 1 month later, I returned to the scene of the crime. The Porsche navigated the potholes of my old neighborhood with the smooth indifference of a predator moving through tall grass. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a gray, flat day that made the suburban lawns look tired and the siding on the houses look cheap. I pulled into the driveway of 42 Maple Street for the last time. The house was dark. The windows were bare, stripped of the curtains my mother had fussed over for 20 years. The neon orange sticker from the sheriff was still on the front glass, peeling slightly at the corners, a scarlet letter announcing to the world that the Wilson family had failed to pay their debts. I turned off the engine. The silence was absolute. There was no Brad shouting about crypto, no father thumping a Bible, no mother weeping for effect. Just the wind and the settling of a house that had been hollowed out. I unlocked the front door with the master key my property manager had given me. The air inside was stale, smelling of dust and hasty departures. I walked through the living room. I saw the indentations in the carpet where the furniture had been. I saw a single lone sock in the corner, a remnant of their frantic packing. I walked to the spot where my father had slapped me. I stood there for a long time waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, grief. But I felt nothing. It was just a room. It was just wood and drywall and paint. The power it had held over me, the fear of their judgment, the desperate need for their validation, it had all evaporated the moment I signed the purchase order for their debt. I walked into the kitchen. The table where we had eaten Thanksgiving dinners, where I had been ignored and belittled, was gone. The kitchen island where Brad had pitched his Ponzi scheme was bare. I ran my hand along the counter. I remembered the nights I had spent here washing dishes while Ebony watched TV, the nights I had studied for my SATs, while my parents planned Ebony's debutante ball. I took a deep breath. I wasn't here to reminisce. I was here to make a decision. My real estate agent, a shark named Caroline, who I had hired specifically for her lack of sentimentality, had sent me the appraisal. The market was hot. The land was valuable. I could flip it. I could rent it out. I could keep it as a trophy, a reminder of the war I had won. But I didn't want a trophy. I wanted a tombstone. I pulled out my phone and dialed Caroline. Put it on the market, I said, but not for profit. Caroline paused. What do you mean, Nia? I want to sell it, I explained, walking through the empty dining room. And I want 100% of the proceeds to go into a trust. A trust for your family? She asked, confused. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. No, the family is insolvent. This trust is for the Nia Wilson Scholarship Fund. It is going to be a full-ride scholarship for girls from this neighborhood, specifically girls who have been kicked out of their homes, girls whose parents told them they weren't enough. I want this house to pay for their tuition. I want the equity my parents tried to steal to be the ladder that helps someone else escape. There was a silence on the line, and then Caroline said, That is beautiful, Nia. And poetic. It is not poetry, I said. It is liquidation. Get the paperwork ready. I want the sign in the yard by tomorrow morning. I hung up. I walked out the back door into the garden. The weeds were already starting to take over my mother's prize rosebushes. Nature was reclaiming the space, erasing the order they had tried so hard to impose. I stood there for a moment looking up at the sky. I felt lighter. The house wasn't an asset anymore. It was just inventory. And I had just cleared the books. I walked back through the empty shell of my childhood, locking the front door behind me. I tossed the keys into the center console of the Porsche. It was done. As I started the engine, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. A prepaid burner phone likely bought with cash at a convenience store. I knew who it was. I had been expecting this call for 30 days. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. Hello. Nia. The voice was thin, reedy, stripped of all its former power. It was my mother, Beatrice. Hello, Mother. There was a ragged intake of breath on the other end. Oh, thank God. Thank God you answered. We didn't know if you would. We didn't know if you changed your number. I haven't changed anything I said. I am exactly where I have always been. Nia, please. She wept. Her tears sounded different now. They weren't the manipulative tears of the church service. They were the terrifying, raw tears of a woman who was sleeping on a mattress with bedbugs. We are at the Starlight. It is awful, Nia. It is cold. There are people here. Bad people. Your father is sick. He ran out of his heart medication and we don't have insurance anymore. Ebony is working double shifts, but it is not enough. We are hungry, Nia. I listened. I looked out the windshield at the house they used to own. I am sorry to hear that, I said. My voice was polite, distant, like I was talking to a stranger who had dialed a wrong number. We need help, she begged. We just need a little help. Just enough to get an apartment. Just enough to get Brad a lawyer. He is falling apart in there, Nia. He says they are going to hurt him. Brad is where he belongs, I said. And you are where you chose to be. How can you say that? She cried, a flash of her old indignation breaking through the desperation. We are your family. We are your flesh and blood. How can you sit in your penthouse and let us rot? Does your conscience not eat you alive? My conscience is clear, Mom, I said. I paid my debts. I worked hard. I built a life. You had a house. You had a business. You had a retirement. You gambled it all on a liar because you liked the way he looked in a suit better than you liked your own daughter. You bet against me, and you lost. Nia, please, she whispered. Just a few thousand, just to get us through the month. We learned our lesson. We know we were wrong. I looked at the dashboard of my car. The gas tank was full. The engine was purring. I had a meeting with my investment team in an hour. I had a date on Friday with a man who knew who I was and didn't ask for a dime. I have given you everything I am going to give, I said. What did you give us? She screamed, her voice cracking. You took everything. You took the house I gave you a lesson, I said. I paused, letting the words sink in. You always told me I needed to be independent. You told me to figure it out. You told me not to ask for handouts. You told me that struggle builds character. Well, Mom, I am giving you the greatest gift a parent can give a child. I am giving you independence. I am giving you the chance to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Nia, you wanted me to be strong, I said. Now it is your turn. Enjoy the independence, Mom. You paid a high price for it. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't wait for the cursing or the begging or the prayers for my damnation. I pressed the red icon on the screen. The call ended. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full. It was rich. I popped the SIM card tray open on the side of my phone. I pulled out the tiny chip, the little piece of plastic that held the number they had used to summon me, to scold me, to extort me for a decade. I rolled down the window. I held the chip between my thumb and forefinger. It glinted in the afternoon sun. Goodbye, I whispered. I flicked it out the window. It disappeared into the overgrown grass of the lawn that was no longer mine. I put the car in gear. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the neighborhood. I looked forward toward the highway, toward the city, toward the skyline that I owned a piece of. I drove west into the setting sun. The light turned the sky a brilliant burning gold. I turned up the music. I felt the speed. I felt the power of the engine responding to my touch. They said blood was thicker than water. They were right. Blood was thick and heavy, and it could drown you if you let it. But I had learned to swim. I was an orphan. I was a villain in their story. I was the cold-hearted banker who foreclosed on her own kin. And I was free. The screen fades to black. This story is a powerful reminder that sharing DNA does not entitle anyone to your success, peace, or resources. Nia's journey proves that toxic loyalty is a debt you never have to pay. When those who should protect you become your predators, the most heroic act is to save yourself. True power isn't just about wealth. It is about the freedom to walk away from people who only value you when they can use you. Sometimes you must dismantle the foundations of a dysfunctional family to build a life of genuine dignity and independence. You are your own best investment. If Nia's absolute victory gave you the satisfaction you needed today, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories where the underdog takes it all.